Bishop Heenan, just before I leave the topic of Bishop Malone's apology to Mr Owens, can I ask that the document under tab 64 be brought up? Now, this is a letter written by Mr Rolls on the 1st of May 1996 to you. And Mr Rolls was the CCI solicitor, Catholic Insurance solicitor, is that right?
I'm not sure whether he was a solicitor, but he certainly was the executive officer of so much.
And if we turn to paragraph, page 2, this letter is actually written in respect of the allegations made by AYP.
Yes.
So if we look at page 2, paragraph 2, turning to the question of how one should proceed with the matter at this stage, I understand you will advise Father Walter Black your immediate response is to contact the alleged offender and endeavour to assure yourself as to the truth or otherwise of the allegations. Now, Father Black was involved with AYP, wasn't he? And May 1996 is about the timing of the allegation by AYP against Father Durham.
Yes.
So that's what this letter relates to. If we look to the next paragraph, Mr Rolls says, it's also understood that should the allegations appear to be sustainable, you would offer as the Bishop of the Diocese a pastoral response without any admission of liability on the part of the diocese or yourself personally. The pastoral response could, however, include a contribution towards the cost of counselling which might be considered appropriate for the better rehabilitation of the victim. And then the next paragraph says, reference has been made to the question of contacting the police. Your response to that suggestion would be that the victim must be encouraged to pursue whatever legal recourse is available, including notification of what is regarded as a criminal act. Okay, so if you see those comments, and that letter is addressed to you on the 1st of May 1996. It was Bishop Malone who offered the apology to Mr Owens, yes? And in 1994, this letter is 1996, but in 1994, did you understand that Bishop Malone... Sorry, I withdraw that. I'll start again. Bishop Malone's apologies in 1996. Right? Did you understand from this letter, dated the 1st of May 1996, that an apology or some recognition of the hurt caused to Mr Owens would not compromise any claim made by him?
I don't think I did understand that.
Because if you look at this letter dated the 1st of May 1996 and accepting it's in respect of AYP, not Mr Owens,
yes.
Isn't that what it said at page 2, in effect? That should the allegations appear sustainable to you, you would offer, as Bishop of the Diocese, a pastoral response without any admission of liability on the part of the diocese or yourself personally.
Yes.
And a pastoral, what do you understand pastoral response to mean?
Well, it would normally be a meeting with the person, and then seeing what help could be offered, especially in terms of counselling. Yes, yes.
And would that involve an apology?
Well, I guess it would depend on how much I or the church authority knew about the situation, but I presume it would include an apology.
But at the very least, it would include some contact with the person making the allegations.
Yes, it would.
And involve some offer of counselling or care to that person.
Yes.
And you accept that it was Bishop Malone who had contact with Mr. Owens?
Yes.
And you never did you?
No.
In 1996?
No.
And that's notwithstanding that as of the 1st of May 1996, you had this advice from Mr. Rolls.
Yes.
And similarly, you never had any such contact with AYP either, did you?
No.
Notwithstanding that you had this advice from Mr. Rolls?
That's right.
And indeed, you've already told us that you accepted, generally speaking, the veracity of their allegations,
Yes.
that they were telling the truth.
Yes.
So there was really no reason, from a legal point of view, to not offer AYP and Mr. Owens some sort of pastoral care. And you did not do that. Now, you've already agreed that you didn't comply with the 1994 protocols in dealing with these allegations that were raised with you up to 1996. You accept that? Can I ask you now about that protocol? And in doing so, can we bring up the document under tab 37? This is the protocol that bishops, or the Queensland Catholic Bishops Conference, developed. That development starting in 1993 and culminating in this protocol, the trial edition released in June 1994. That's correct?
Yes.
And you say in your statement that a draft protocol was developed by the Queensland Catholic Bishops in 1993. So this trial edition didn't sort of emerge overnight, did it?
No.
That there was considerable consultation and work that went into what became this trial edition protocol of June 1994. And you've already told us that you were involved in the development of that protocol.
Yes.
And that involved education and training about child sexual abuse. Is that correct?
You mean for myself personally?
Well,
No.
perhaps if I withdraw that.
Yes.
That involved becoming some consultation with experts about responding to and handling allegations of child sexual abuse.
Yes, certainly.
And those persons were experts in that field?
I believe they were.
And you knew how to access those experts?
Yes.
You'd had meetings with them?
I believe because we were in Rockhampton, we might have had limited access to those expert people. I would have imagined they were with the Centrecare, our social welfare organisation, not Brisbane or anywhere else, so I'm not sure.
But you knew how to contact them by telephone, for example.
Yes.
You knew how to organise a meeting with them. And you'd had the benefit of their knowledge in preparing this draft or trial protocol. And that protocol was in effect from June 1994. If we can turn to page 3. So if we scroll down, we can see there is an introduction,
Yes.
the structure, pastoral action, and then if we bring up tab 38, there's a more complete document under that tab. Which again is labelled the Trial Edition, June 1994. And if we scroll down, if we just pause there, we can see that there is a foreword, and that is signed by Archbishop John Battersby
Yes.
and Sister Pauline Robinson. And if I just draw your attention to the first paragraph of that foreword, it's written there that the trauma of sexual abuse affects everyone. It is a breach of trust and abuse of power which is abhorrent to the total community. It demands a response which is open, prudent, sensitive, pastoral and centred on healing. That was the protocol of the church, wasn't it?
Yes.
As of June 1994 and developed from 1993 through to 1994. And then we look at the requirements. If we go, we'll skip a bit, if we go to part 4. Page 6. And we can see there that the following requirements are mandatory in pastoral action provided by the competent authority. And can I just draw your attention to some aspects of this? 4.1, priority will be given to ensuring the protection and support of the child or vulnerable adult.
Yes.
Point 2, that you will appoint a delegate to receive and evaluate every allegation of sexual abuse. And in your case, in Rockhampton, it was Father Hines. And then that the Provincial Bishops' Conference of Queensland will appoint persons who will join with delegates to form the Special Resource Group. And their primary function will be to receive reports. And that civil, criminal, industrial, canon law must be respected. Correct? And then the protocol sets out the procedures.
Yes. Yes.
And then if we look particularly at 5.6, there's a requirement that the response will be collaborative. And at 5.8, that every attempt should be made to offer appropriate professional support services to the alleged victims or complainant. And then if we look at the guidelines under Part 6, it talks about, at 6.2, that all allegations of sexual abuse must be taken seriously. And 6.6, that allegations of sexual abuse by a complainant should be responded to in a manner that manifests care and openness. And it goes on to say that the church, it should confirm that the church is concerned for the well-being of the victim. Can you see that? Now, at the time that this protocol was being developed in 1993, of which you were part,
Yes.
you had received the report or allegation from AYB, hadn't you? And do you agree that in dealing with that complaint or allegation, even though this protocol wasn't formally in place yet, you didn't comply with many of the features of the protocol that was put into place from June 1994?
I object, Your Honour. That question, many of the features should be put more specifically to the Bishop of Sheffield.
Yes, yes.
Happy to do that. For example, you didn't respond immediately to that complaint, did you?
No, not to the, no, not immediately, no.
No. There was a letter that was not responded to, and from the time that a request was made for a meeting, it was from August 1993. It wasn't until February 1994 that you met in person. And in the context of that protocol, would you agree that that is not an immediate response?
Yes, I would.
In terms of the allegations that were raised by AYD, sorry, not AYD, by Mr Owens and AYQ, you never in fact met with either of those persons, did you? Were they advised of those protocols?
One of the reasons, no, not an excuse, is that they lived away from Rockhampton and somewhere else, but that's not meant to be an excuse. But I'm not sure where they were that those protocols were available, but I can understand they should have come through themselves.
Was any pastoral care or counselling offered to either of those persons?
Not that I can recall.
And in respect of AYP, similarly, was any sort of pastoral care or counselling Do you think that your response to AYB, Mr Owens, AYQ and AYP, do you think any of those persons were dealt with in a manner that reflected the protocol or the forward in the protocol as to how a victim of sexual abuse should be treated?
I think some of those requirements were there, but it was a growing experience for me. But I would have to agree that it was very inadequate on the protocol.
After 1994, when this protocol was put into place, if this protocol was not complied with, was there any consequence for the diocese or for the relevant person within it? What was the consequence of that?
No, I believe there wasn't a consequence, that it was up to each diocese to implement. There was no authority greater than the bishop and the local response person.
In dealing with any of those complaints, so the complaints of AYB, Mr Owens, AYQ or AYP, did you seek the advice of any expert in child sexual abuse? The experts that had been used in the formation of these protocols?
I don't recall whether I did or not.
I mean, you certainly consulted the insurance company and your solicitors, but did you consult any expert as to how to deal, in particular with Father Durham, who was alive and still working with the church?
I believe I did not.
Because you were aware of those experts and could avail yourself of them, couldn't you? And you didn't do that?
I believe so.
We've heard evidence during the course of the hearing that after the ministerial statement in September 1996, in early 1997, the Neerkol Action Support Group was formed.
Yes.
And that involved meetings between former residents of Neerkol and the Sisters of Mercy.
Yes.
And also the Children's Commissioner, Mr Alford, and also an independent arbitrator, Mr Britton. And you were aware, as the Bishop of Rockhampton, of the formation of the Neerkol Action Support Group from the beginning, weren't you? You were in close contact with the Sisters of Mercy, and in particular Sister Locke.
Yes.
So you were aware that there was such a group being formed and that they were meeting with the Sisters of Mercy. And by 1996, as we've gone through, you were aware of these allegations against former priests who had worked within your diocese.
Yes.
We've heard evidence that the Action Support Group was formed in 1997, about May or early June 1997, and that there were meetings involving the Sisters of Mercy, Neerkol Action Support Group, on the 11th of June, the 18th of June, and the 15th of July. And at those meetings, there was no attendance by yourself or any other member of the diocese. You agree with that?
I do, yes.
You were aware of that those meetings were occurring, though, weren't you?
I'm not sure that I was aware of those three meetings. I knew there was a meeting between the group and the sisters.
At least by August 1997, you were invited to attend one of those meetings?
That's correct.
And because of a prior arrangement or prior commitment, you couldn't attend?
Yes.
Bishop Heenan, between May 1997 and August 1997, did you personally or anyone within your diocese initiate being involved in those meetings?
No, I don't believe so. I believe we were waiting for an invitation to those meetings. We would have been waiting for an invitation.
What were you waiting for? Why were you waiting for an invitation?
Because I believe it was their prerogative to invite us if they wanted us to be there.
Did you suggest such a course of action?
I don't believe it was appropriate for me to do that.
Well, they could always say no, couldn't they, if they didn't want you there?
They could.
Then in August 1997, you declined to attend. I'm sorry, I'll withdraw that. August 1997, you were unable to attend.
Yes.
And were you present in court when AYD spoke of his reaction to the fact that he had been told, AYD being the former president, and when he was told by Mr Alford that you had another commitment, of his reaction to that?
Yes, yes.
That notwithstanding your commitment, he would have thought that in the circumstances it would have been more important for you to attend this meeting? Did you give any consideration to perhaps making an attendance at that meeting a priority, given all that you had been informed of and the detail of the allegations you'd heard?
Well, no, I didn't, because of the nature of the appointment that I had in Mackay, which had been there for 6 months, which would involve many parish groups and activities, which, looking back now, I probably would have cancelled that, but at that time it was an important weekend or several days, so I did not at that time, to answer your question, consider cancelling that appointment.
And between August 1997 and when you did eventually attend in December 1997, did you personally instigate another time to attend? Did you give that any priority?
No, I believe that I was waiting for the invitation for the next meeting to be made known to me.
Did you think it might have been important to show some initiative in this regard? I mean, I'm asking about your state of mind at the time. At the time, did you think that might be important?
No, I believe I was waiting for the initiative from the group.
Because you first attend one of these meetings on the 2nd of December 1997, is that correct?
Yes, correct.
And it's after that that you draft a letter of apology to the former residents of Neerkol. And it's after that that you provide an apology to Mr Owen personally at his request. So that is, in effect, 5 years after you're first informed of allegations involving a former parish priest. And that is about 18 months after the ministerial statement of September 1996. Do you think that's an appropriate response to the allegations?
No, I don't believe so.
Do you think it would have been appropriate to show some initiative and become involved earlier on?
Well, I can look back now and say yes. I know what I was thinking at the time. I was waiting to be invited.
In February 1997, so to put in its context, before the formation of Neerkol Action Support Group, Father Durham was charged with a significant number of criminal charges. You were aware of that? And at that time, he actually still was employed by the church as an administrator at Neerkol, and he was also still living at the presbytery. And it was only after he was charged with those offences that he was asked to leave the presbytery. Is that correct? And that the church stopped employing him as the administrator. So as of February 1997, That's about 3 years after you first became aware of the allegations. Or more than 3 years.
Yes.
Why was it at that point that you decided to ask him to leave the presbytery and to stop working for the church?
I believe it would have been because he had been charged.
Why was that an impetus to you making those decisions then?
Probably because of the public nature of the charge and the realisation that this was what he was facing as a priest, or as somebody who was being charged.
Isn't it the case that it was only then that you took those actions, namely to ask him to leave the presbytery and to stop working as the administrator because of the public nature of the criminal charges?
I say yes.
And because you were concerned about further damage to the church's reputation if he was seen to still be at the presbytery and working in that capacity?
Sure, it's about the reputation of the church, but I saw it as very inappropriate that a person facing those charges should be involved.
Do you always have that view?
I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure. I think it was a developing view.
Can we bring up tab number 96, the document under tab number 96? This is a letter dated the 25th of February 1997 to Bishop Heenan, to yourself, by Sister Rowan.
Yes.
And in that letter, she says, I have chosen to respond to your request in writing in an attempt to express my thoughts more clearly. You asked me on the 12th of February if Father Durham could continue living at Neerkol. Now, if I pause there, that's after he's been charged.
Yes,
do you accept that?
Yes.
After stating my reservations, I consulted the members of our congregational leadership team. I met with you on the 17th of February to convey our decision that Father Durham should not continue living at Neerkol, and I tried to clearly state my reasons. And then Sister Rowan sets out those reasons. She says living on his own at Neerkol would not offer Father Durham any personal support nor any supervision, which would seem very important for someone who has been accused of sexual abuse. She also says, I believed it would be very painful for the sisters and the parishioners, especially when they gather for Mass, if Father Durham was living next door and was unable to preside or be present at the Eucharist. As I also indicated, the house would have been available to Father Durham until you found alternative accommodation, and he could return as soon as the allegations were dismissed. Can I just pause there and ask you, did you contemplate that the allegations may well be dismissed at that stage?
No, I certainly didn't.
Do you have any explanation as to why if you can, why Sister Rowan might have included that?
No, I do not.
As Sister Rowan then goes on to say, when you asked me to reconsider this decision, I referred to the principles and procedures outlined in Towards Healing. I didn't find it very helpful. She then goes on to say, but I am uncertain from your conversation if you have actually asked Father Durham to stand aside from a particular office or from all offices held in the church. Can I assume that you believe he is innocent of the charges, and that is why he has your permission to say Mass for the sisters and to continue as their chaplain? If that is the case, it seems unusual that he is not allowed to preside at Mass with the parish community. She then goes on to say, I really cannot understand why Father Durham would want to continue living in the very place where he has been accused of sexual offences. It does not seem at all appropriate. I agree with your observation that Neerkol is quite practice, but I believe there would have to be alternative accommodation which would be much less traumatic. In the penultimate paragraph, she says, for all those reasons, I do not believe the presbytery is the best place for Father Durham to reside while these allegations are being handled. See that?
Yes, I can.
Now, firstly, is it the case that you actually asked and urged that Father Durham be allowed to continue to live at the presbytery?
I certainly asked.
And when Sister Rowan says that she declined and you asked her to reconsider her position,
Yes.
So do you agree you asked twice?
Yes.
Given what you knew about the allegations, why was that? Why would you ask for that?
Why would I ask for?
For him to continue to live there?
Well, it was simply that he had to have a place to live. I had to provide that for him. He had been stood down from ministry. There were no children there, and it was, to me, a first port of request. I realise now that Sister Diane was wise, and I accepted what she said. But I think you asked me what my reason was. I thought it was a private place where he could be there on his own and not be in contact with people.
You eventually accept Sister Rowan's position.
Yes.
And you ask him to leave the presbytery. And you accept, don't you, that that's at the instigation of, or at the request of Sister Rowan?
Certainly.
Rather than your view?
Certainly.
And then on the 26th of February 1997, do you write a letter to parishioners about the charges that have been laid against Father Durham?
Yes.
And if I can take you to a document under tab 97. This is a letter dated the 26th of February 1997. And can I just ask you, who would this letter have been sent to? How would this be distributed?
It would have gone to the priest of the diocese.
To be given to the parishioner?
No, I don't
just to the
so.
priest?
Yes.
And you say in that letter that you write with the sad news that one of our brothers has been charged with serious sexual offences. If what you say is true and you believed or you accepted the veracity of the complainants, why would you describe that as sad news, that he has been charged?
Well, I believe any misconduct like that on the part of a priest is sad. I don't know whether there would have been a better word, but it was sad because it was disgraceful. Maybe I should use that word, but that's why I used it, because the priest would have been feeling very sad about it too. I mean, that doesn't mean they're excusing it.
No, but did you mean to convey it was sad he'd been charged,
No.
or sad that he'd actually committed the offences?
That he had committed the offences.
Because that's not actually what you say, is it?
Oh, that's what I intended.
By February 1997, Did you understand the impact that this offending, this alleged offending, had had on those complainants or former residents?
I don't believe I understood it fully.
And did you understand the impact any show of support, public or otherwise, would have on former residents of, show of support for Father Durham,
Yes.
would have on former victims or victims of abuse by him at the orphanage?
I didn't understand then. I do understand much better now, but I didn't understand then.
And you've told us that you accepted their veracity.
Yes.
Because during the course of these proceedings, the church funded Father Durham's legal defence, didn't they? And what was the basis, on what basis did you do that?
The basis would be, or is, that a priest is dependent on the diocese for his sustenance, for his support, for his accommodation, for support in his ministry. So, in my understanding, that didn't change, or that doesn't change, when a priest offends or goes away from his ministry. He still deserves the support of the diocese because he doesn't have other means to support himself.
But would that occur today?
I believe each case would have to be judged on its own merits, but I can simply say again that a bishop is responsible for each and every one of his priests in the positive and good experiences, as well as in the failings of our priests.
I mean, there are other provisions to provide legal services for people, aren't they, who can't afford them themselves, such as legal aid, legal services commission. I mean, that would have been available to Father Durham, wouldn't it?
Not sure.
Okay. However, you agree that in 1997 and the years that followed, the diocese funded his legal defence. And at the same time, the Neerkol Action Support Group, for a large part of this, is negotiating a settlement for the pain and suffering they've sustained as victims, in part, of his abuse. Looking back, do you see the tension in that?
Okay.
And do you think it was an appropriate thing to do, to fund his defence when there was a limited amount of resources to settle victims' claims and to provide care for them?
I think I had equal responsibility in both of those areas.
And in March 2000, when Father Durham was convicted of an offences against AYP, you provided a character reference for him, didn't you? If we pull up document under tab 232. Sorry, 233. We see the document 9th of February 1999. Oh, I'm sorry, I've made a mistake. This is a reference that you gave in respect of the plea by Father Durham in respect of AYB.
Right.
Okay. But in 1999, you were aware of the allegations by AYP, weren't you?
Yes, yes.
So you gave this character reference, notwithstanding that you were aware of the other allegations by AYP. And you say that in the last paragraph that I ask that the incredible amount of good he has done will be weighed against the failing that have also been part of his life.
Yes.
At that time, you were aware, weren't you, generally, through your involvement with the Neerkol Action Support Group, that it wasn't just AYP and AYB who'd made allegations against Father Durham. You were aware of that, weren't you? That there were numerous allegations of sexual abuse against him. That's correct.
Yes.
Although not everyone wanted to take criminal action, he was regarded as a perpetrator at the Neerkol Orphanage. And yet, notwithstanding that, you gave this character reference?
Yes, I did. And the reason is that I've always been asked for character references, or often been asked where someone was facing charges. And I was always advised to name the charges in the beginning of my letter so that I wasn't pretending the person was perfect. But there was a place to say this person is not to be dismissed as not having made a contribution to life, and in this case to the ministry. So that's why I did it.
Well, you go a little further than that, don't you, Bishop Heenan? You say in the last paragraph, he's had a unique life as a citizen of this district. Priest to many parish communities, chaplain to service personnel, and inspiring friend to young and old alike. I ask that the incredible amount of good he has done will be weighed against the failing that has also been part of the life. Do you think that is perhaps to overstate the character of Father Durham?
Could be, it could be. Yes.
I mean, there is no mention of all the other allegations made by other residents of Neerkol and the incredible harm they say he'd done him.
This was a reference given earlier, wasn't it, to AYB?
In February 1999.
I don't know.
Do you agree that is an inappropriate reference for a person about whom you had been informed had all these other allegations against him, or numerous other allegations against him?
Yes, I can agree that I would have written something different.
Would you have written anything at all?
Yes, only in the sense that I was always advised or asked to put some support into a person in their brokenness and their failure.
After 2000, the diocese was involved, I withdraw that, from 1997 to 2000, late 1997 to 2000, the diocese was involved in, with the Sisters of Mercy in providing a settlement to many of the Neerkol residents' claims.
Yes, yes.
And after that, there was several aspects to that, and several claims settled through the diocese and through the contact with the Sisters of Mercy. So I direct in particular these questions to you in respect to the period between 1993 and 2000 in particular. Do you accept that your response as Bishop of Rockhampton showed a lack of understanding of the nature of child sexual abuse and the impact on people who had been victims to such abuse. You accept that, don't you?
Ask what's behind that. Why are you asking that? Or could you all perhaps just give me the question again, if you wouldn't mind?
Sure. The way in which you dealt with the allegations that were made leading up until 2000, the allegations by AYB, by Mr Owen, by AYQ and by AYP, generally was an inadequate response by the Church to those allegations. Do you accept that?
Yes, I can accept that.
And in failing to remove Father Durham in particular from the presbytery and from his role as an administrator and his contact with children, you placed other children at risk of sexual abuse by him. You accept that, don't you?
Do that now.
And that your response to these allegations was a wholly inadequate response. You accept that, don't you?
I regard it was inadequate. I don't think it was wholly inadequate, but I do regard it as inadequate.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Mr. Kernaghan.
Sir, my name is Aaron Kernaghan, and I appear for two of the survivors of Neerkol,
Yes.
Mr. Heenan and Ms. AYL, who you would have seen giving evidence. I'd like to ask you some questions in relation to something that you told Learned Counsel Assisting earlier this morning about your history before coming into the role of bishop. You answered some questions that indicated that at the time that you entered that role, you didn't have any training in relation to the issues of child sexual assault. Is that right?
That's correct.
And I understood you to refer or mention the word that you did have experience. Do you remember saying that?
I do remember saying that, yes, yes.
What experience were you referring to?
Experience in the sense that when we bishops had started to meet together, and that was before I was a bishop, that I was hearing that there were examples of abuse by priests throughout Australia. I didn't know the people, but I just knew that it was sadly a reality in the church.
That knowledge was knowledge you had prior to becoming a bishop?
Yes, in a general way.
Did you have that knowledge while you were a parish priest?
No, not really, not really. I might have had a little, but I don't think specifically.
Did that knowledge form part of your work in providing education for priests?
I would say no. I was only in that role for a short time.
But in any event, sometime before becoming a bishop, you developed a knowledge of the issue in Australia.
Yes, I would say so.
And that knowledge extended to what?
Knowledge extended to the fact that it was a reality, among some clergy or among us, the clergy of Australia.
When you say it, you're referring to sexual abuse
Yes, that's what
by clergy
Yes,
of children.
yes.
Did your knowledge extend to the issues that arise when such allegations are made?
Could you say that again, please?
I'll rephrase it.
Yes, please.
Bishop, did you have knowledge of some of the difficulties that had been encountered in Australia when allegations against clergy of sexual abuse of children had been made?
I don't believe I had a specific knowledge of that.
There was no discussions that you were a part of in which there was an appreciation that the church was in a difficult position?
No, No, I don't believe so. Can I just simply say I went from becoming a parish priest to a role of supporting priests, but that role only lasted 9 months before I was appointed to become Bishop of Rockhampton.
Clearly, when you were appointed as bishop, you would have envisaged that protection of the children in your congregation and in your archdiocese would be a responsibility that you would have to take on?
Be part of the general responsibility, certainly.
You understood that when you were elevated to the level of a bishop? Did you consider yourself sufficiently qualified to be worthy of that elevation?
To become a bishop.
Did you consider yourself to have sufficient qualifications to be able to execute your duty with regard to the children in your archdiocese as a bishop?
It wasn't only children, of course, it was caring for all people in the diocese, children, adult people, aged people. So, as I said before, one is appointed without sort of consent almost. One has to say yes, but it's not as though we're appointed because of certain qualifications, except to be a pastor.
I'm sorry, did you just say that it's not as if you're appointed as a bishop because of certain qualifications?
Yes, I said except perhaps as a pastor, as a good pastor to the people.
A good pastor, I would suggest to you, knows how to protect the children in his flock.
Of course.
Did you, when you were notified that you would be elevated to a bishop, have time to contemplate if it was a role that you could acquit with regard to the protection of children?
I don't believe that I specifically focused on that role.
You were, of course, aware that that would be a role that you would be taking on. When you came into that role, did you seek to appraise yourself of the issues of children within your archdiocese at the time that you took up the office of bishop?
Well, I believe that in growing into the role of bishop, I would have been aware of children and our schools, and in that sense, in a general sense, yes, I would have been aware of the need for protection.
I would like to ask you if you appraised yourself of those issues in a particular sense.
I don't believe a particular sense.
Did, when you took the office of bishop, you receive a handover or a report from your predecessor?
No, my predecessor was deceased 18 months before.
There was no one fulfilling the function of bishop in the interim?
There was an administrator. That would be Father Hines.
Did you receive any information from him about issues of current standing within the archdiocese?
Well, at one stage, I think it's reflected there that we were asked by the Catholic Church Insurance to name any people who were in any way perhaps for whom there was any shadow, and we did. I didn't know the priest well, so Father Hines would have said to me.
Bishop, I'm asking you about the time when you came into the role of bishop and how you appraised yourself of those people that you were now the leader of a congregation for, and particularly the children in that congregation. What did you do to appraise yourself of the issues involved?
I don't believe I did anything specifically more than have a care for those children.
And that is a position that is one that you would agree is more abstract than practical. Yeah. You, when you became a bishop, had known about Neerkol already?
Beg your pardon, I could not hear this.
When you became the bishop of Rockhampton, you had already known about Neerkol, that it existed?
My calling.
I think it's the pronunciation of Neerkol that
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Bishop might not have heard correctly.
You knew when you became bishop of the existence of Neerkol,
Certainly did.
and you understood that it had a long history of providing facilities to children. And indeed, you've spoken of that in your letter to your parishioners that you've subsequently indicated your regret over.
Yes, I do.
Is it right to say that at the time that you became a bishop, you had respect for the institution of Neerkol?
It is.
And at the time that you became bishop, did you know, at that time, Father Durham?
I would have met him a long time ago, but I met him again.
But you wouldn't say that you were overly familiar with him at that point in time?
No, I would not.
Or had a long-standing knowledge of him? Can I ask you then, pardon me, Your Honour. When you gave your reference to the court for Father Durham,
Yes.
you had something to say about how long you'd known him for. Do you remember what you said?
I don't at this stage.
Perhaps if it be brought up on the screen, I'll just obtain my tab 233. This is the reference that Council Assisting took you to just recently. Just see there, the opening paragraph qualifies your knowledge or sets out your knowledge and history with Father Durham. You see that it says that you've known him for over a period of 45 years. Sorry, I'll rephrase that. You've known him over a period of 45 years.
Yes.
And in particular, in the last 7 years, you'd had close contact as the bishop. And this letter, as I understood it, is dated the 9th of February 1999. Is that right? Now, just to make clear what you meant by that paragraph, were you seeking to indicate to the court that you had had a long-standing association and knowledge of Father Durham?
No, I was not.
You were just indicating that he's someone that you knew of.
Well, can I clarify that?
Please.
That Father Durham was an army chaplain, and when I was in the Army Cadets as a secondary skills student, he was the person who came on the big Army Cadet camps, and I would have known him there as a person who was made known as a chaplain, who was a person who gathered people for evening concerts, and so that was what I was implying there, that I had, as a secondary skills student, known Father Durham as just a person up there, but not as an intimate.
Did you, at the time that you wrote this reference to the court in February of 1999, consider Father Durham your friend?
I wouldn't consider the priests of the diocese my friends as a bishop.
In any event, during the 7 years that you refer to having had a close contact with him, you see that there in the first paragraph. For the past 7 years, I have had close contact as the bishop of the diocese. Do you see that?
Yes.
Most of that close contact was in relation to the allegations that we're speaking about today, isn't that right?
No, it would be about ministry, and my understanding that the priests of the diocese gathered several times a year.
Yes.
I visited all the parishes each year. I would be implying that, like all the other priests, he was someone that I had that close contact with.
So do we take you to mean that for the 7 years prior to 1999, during the time that allegations were being made against him, it was your expectation that he was continuing to engage in his ministry as a priest?
That's true, I have said that.
And you permitted that?
Yes.
And you're, in 1999, writing a reference attesting to the quality of his character during that period too. Is that right?
Yes, I guess it is.
Can I draw your attention to the second paragraph of that statement? Perhaps if it just be scrolled up slightly. I'm sorry, the third paragraph rather. You referred to your experience of him as a chaplain to the armed forces, and you see the third paragraph makes reference to that there. And you, in the second sentence, refer to him having a unique gift with youth. You see that?
Yes, I can see that.
I would like to suggest to you and ask you to comment or agree or disagree as you wish, that that is a statement given in the context of what you knew. That is a statement that would be understood by victims of sexual abuse as particularly callous.
I can understand that if you say so, but it was not my intention to imply that.
Why would you use those terms with reference to a person you knew to be a pedophile?
The term because I knew that he had an interest in the cadet movement, and I think I heard that he had interest in sporting activities at St Joseph's, Neerkol.
See, what I'm getting to is that by using those terms, you must have had time when writing this to pause and consider the full ambit of what you had known this man to be like.
I wrote that letter as honestly as I could.
And when you were writing it, you had time to pause and reflect on the things that you thought you knew about the man and what he had been charged with and found guilty of or pleaded guilty to. Yes? Is that right?
I wrote that letter as honestly as I could at the time.
I understand that. But do we take from your reference to his unique gift with youth, particularly in the promotion of sports amongst them, that you considered that his criminal offending against children was the exception and not the rule?
It could be interpreted. It wasn't my thought.
Was it your hope that in writing this you were trying to reduce or mitigate the apparent seriousness of his offending?
I was not.
You weren't trying to have the court consider a more merciful approach than they might otherwise consider for a man of no character? Then why is it that at the bottom you ask the court to do exactly that? You see the last sentence? You specifically ask the court to weigh what you say is his amount of good that he has done against his criminal behaviour, which you refer to as the failing that has also been part of his life. Why did you say that?
I think I explained before that in being asked to write references for someone who's facing charges, that it was my request, or not my request, my wish to say that this person, there was a very positive side to their life, which shouldn't be written off altogether.
In your statement to this Royal Commission at paragraph 108, you talk about the process of writing this reference that's on the screen in front of you. You said, and I think you've given evidence in this these same terms today, it has always been my practice during my career as a priest and a bishop to write character references for people facing criminal sentencing. That's right. And then you go on to say, I did this regularly for youth under my ministry in Brisbane and continued to do so in Rockhampton. I would not address any of the criminals' innocence or otherwise in my character references. Is that right?
Could I just ask you to repeat that last part?
I would not address any of the criminals' innocence or otherwise in my character reference. However, I would always acknowledge the charges someone was facing before offering and testimony in support of that person. Is that right? So did the guilt or innocence of a person you were writing a character reference for play any role in your assessment of their character?
I tried to balance the offences against the good side of their character when I wrote.
Would you agree with me, with reference to the term youth, which you can see there at the top of the page, that there is a significant difference, or at the very least a quantifiable difference, between providing a character reference for a youth member of your parish for a crime that they had committed, and providing a character reference for one of your priests as their bishop and as the Bishop of Rockhampton, where they're charged with sexually abusing members of your congregation?
There's a difference.
The latter is a more serious measure as the Bishop of Rockhampton, isn't it? Do you agree that when you chose to give this reference, you were doing so out of a sense of loyalty to a priest in your charge?
There was that dimension, certainly.
Rose, I note the time. Is that a convenient time?
We'll sit on. We'll sit on until 1 and take the lunch adjournment between 1 and 2, and then finish at 3:30.
Thank you, Bishop. As the Bishop of Rockhampton, it was your function to lead by example and to set the tone for the practices of those people who were part of the faith that they saw you as their local head of. You agree with that proposition? Yes. When you give a character reference for a sex offender who is one of your own, what is the message that you hope to convey to your congregation?
I don't see the message as to my congregation so much as to the court, to balance the harm or this person has done with what has been positive in that person's life.
Am I right in saying that you don't resolve from the position that you've adopted in your reference?
Well, I'm hearing what is being said and possibly should have written something less fulsome than that, but I don't resolve from the position of supporting, be it one of my priests or someone who appeals for my support in that sense of writing a reference to recognise that there is a positive side to that person's life.
So you still maintain the need to have some balance about the discourse about Father Durham?
Yes.
And just so that we're not speaking in generic terms and we understand what you're saying, to take you back to tab 233 of the tender bundle and the reference, you'll see come up there on the screen, you can see the second paragraph of that reference. In the second paragraph, you say that he's, as a man and as a priest, had a profoundly beneficial effect on many thousands of people. I take it you maintain that position.
I do.
He's ministered effectively as a priest to Catholic people throughout the Diocese of Rockhampton. I take it that you presently maintain that position. I take it that the rest of that paragraph are positions that you presently maintain.
I see a little more of that document, please. I believe that he had that effect and that gift to many people.
So by that, we can accurately say that what is in this reference reflects your current thinking of Father Durham.
No, it reflects the story of his life. It doesn't accept the fact that he was guilty of sexual abuse. It simply says that that's the background to the life that he has lived.
Well, it's more than just a recitation of history, isn't it? It's your own endorsement as the Bishop of Rockhampton. You say
of his past life, yes.
You say that he was a fine chaplain. Is that right?
Yes.
And is that what you think now?
All I can add to you, sir, is that what I put in that letter there was drawn from my understanding of his life and his service, and it was what I believed then.
All right. And it's what you believe now, isn't it?
Oh, I'd have to have reservations about it now.
So you wouldn't agree with the tenor of the reference that he was a good man who did some bad things?
I'd like to leave that.
You'd like to believe that. You see, Bishop, at a number of times during your evidence and your statements to the Royal Commission and your statements to the victims that have been reported in this matter, you have been credited for making concessions to ignorance on your part or failings on your part. You've spoken of this reference as an example of some sort of a failing, something that you might have done differently now, but you've just told us that fundamentally you would still like to think of Father Durham in the way that this reference reads. Is that right?
I object, Your Honour. There are so many concepts tied up in that question. It's impossible to answer it in a simple way without accepting everything that has gone before. If my learned friend wants to put to the Bishop that he would or would not write that reference now, then he should.
It's not the point of the question, but I'll approach it in a different way, Your Honour, and make it more helpful to the witness. Bishop, you have expressed yourself as regretting having written this reference in the way that it is written. Is that correct?
Well, I can't change the past. I have written this. I would probably write it differently now, yes.
Is it the case that the reference, and I put this proposition to you before, but I want to be clear what I'm saying to you, Bishop, is it the case that the reference goes to the notion that Father Durham was by and large a good man who'd done some bad things?
No, it's not as straightforward as that.
Right? Well, then explain what it is you're asking the court, the District Court at Rockhampton, to conclude from this report.
That this man was facing serious charges, that in the other dimension of his life, he was a very positive person and benefited a lot of people, and he wasn't completely a person who didn't have some right to consideration.
All those good deeds.
Yes, I suppose so. I'm trying to say that there were good dimensions to his life.
In trying to balance the account and the weighing up of his circumstances, you don't make any reference as the Bishop of Rockhampton to the fact that the conduct for which he is pleading guilty is detestable to you?
No, I do not.
You don't renounce his conduct?
No, that wasn't the point of my reference.
No, because the point of your reference was to cast him in a good light, wasn't it?
No, it was to cast him in a light that wasn't completely negative.
You had an opportunity, did you not, to speak as the Bishop of Rockhampton to not only what you believed of the man's character, but also what you believed of his acts. Isn't that right?
Well, I believe I did that in the first paragraph.
Where you said that you're aware that he's pleading guilty to several serious charges of which he has been accused. You chose not to renounce his conduct in this document, isn't that right?
I believe I, at the beginning of that letter, acknowledged that he had been accused of serious offences.
He's pleaded guilty to them.
Yeah.
Is it expressing your view as the Bishop of Rockhampton that the conduct for which he stands for sentence is detestable?
Yes.
Does this letter show that it is completely contrary to Catholic doctrine and principle?
I wrote this letter as on the request to give a reference.
So you wrote the letter as the Bishop of Rockhampton?
Yes.
That's how you signed it? You were invoking the significant authority of your position to support your character reference for this man. Well, isn't that the case?
Yes. Character reference in the sense, if you don't mind my saying again, in view of the fact that his life wasn't completely evil or untoward, that there were certain signs, parts of his life that he deserved acknowledgement.
I only have one more question about this particular document.
Yes.
And I'd like to ask you about what you just said. And it's this. When you say that his life was more nuanced than simply being...
Sorry, I didn't. Okay.
When you say that his life was more nuanced than simply being a bad man, how did you know that?
Object, it wasn't said at all. Those words were used.
Well, I'll rephrase it. When you just said what you said about the nature of Father Durham, how did you know that was right?
Well, in the 7 years that I was bishop there, to that time, I had seen him celebrating ministerial church ministry. I had seen him as the chaplain to the show societies. I had seen him as a person who gathered people in aged care for music, singer on the piano. He's a great pianist and a great voice. I had seen this side of him, and he was loved by all those people, and they didn't know the terrible other side of him.
But you did.
Not then, I didn't.
Yes, you did.
Not through all of it.
Bishop, for the 7 years prior to 1999, are you saying you didn't know the terrible other side of Father Durham?
Well, I think I've tried to address that in saying I didn't act appropriately in
It's not my question, Bishop, with respect.
Yes.
I'm asking you, do you say that during the period of 7 years prior to 1999, to which you just referred having observations of Father Durham, you didn't know the other side of him?
Well, I did know the other side.
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
Could tab 74 be brought up on the screen? You just go down to the second page. You see, this is the pastoral letter to which Councillor Sisting has asked you a number of questions about.
Yes.
And this is a document in which you have something to say about the nature of people saying things or making allegations about Father Durham and the Sisters of Mercy and various others. Is that right? Now, this document was written in 1996, 3 years or thereabouts prior to your reference to the court here at Rockhampton. And again, it's signed off as you, as the Bishop of Rockhampton. And you intended this to be a document employing your authority as the Bishop to indicate to your parishioners what the position of the Church was in relation to the allegations, yes? Yes. This, in fact, was a document that you drafted for the express purpose of responding to what you saw were attacks. That's right, isn't it?
Attacks on Sisters of Mercy and the whole story of the Neerkol Orphanage.
Yes. Which is to say that in 1996, having heard complaints, and Councillor Sisting have taken you through them, I don't propose to do that, but having heard those complaints, having known of them, your interpretation of them were that they were attacks upon your church and attacks upon the Sisters of Mercy. Yes?
Not sure I would use the word attacks.
Well,
they certainly were a diminishment.
Bishop, with respect, you did use the word attacks. If we see page 1, see this letter to the fathers of the various parishes of your diocese?
Yes.
Do you see in the first paragraph where you say that you've decided to write to the priests and the people of the diocese concerning the serious allegations that have been made against the orphanage at Neerkol, beginning with the ministerial statement in State Parliament by the Honourable Kevin Lingard, Minister for Families, Youth and Community Care, and followed by attacks through the newspapers and Channel 10 in its news bulletins. Much has been done to slur the good name of Neerkol and offer insult to the sisters, the chaplains who served there and the children who resided there. Is that right?
Yes.
You considered what you were confronting was an attack. Your word.
Attack on the good name, yes.
Well, the good name is only a good name if it's good in truth. And you had reason to believe that that was a more complicated issue than what you might otherwise have thought. But in 1996, you were prepared not only to say that you dispute the allegations, you went further in your letter to your church, and you claimed that the allegations were scurrilous.
Could I just ask, Your Honour, my learned friend to clarify when he talks about the allegations? He's listed a number of aspects being the media, the complaints by former residents and the ministerial statement. They're three things in very different categories. And so if he is asking what the Bishop thought were attacks, he should be more specific.
Happy to do that, Your Honour. You may have heard that objection. Is it the case, from reading that letter that's in front of you, that you are writing to deal with the several things that you refer to in that first paragraph?
Yes, I believe I was writing in response to media approach, which to me was denigrating and writing off the good name or the name of St Joseph's Neerkol, and I was hearing from people who had been there and who had been very fulfilled or satisfied by being there. I'd been talking to some sisters who had worked there who were hurt by it. That's what I was referring to, and I will say again, it was the most serious mistake I think I've made in my life to write that letter, but that's what I'm saying.
I'm sorry. The letter is a rebuttal, first of all, beginning with the ministerial statement by the Honourable Kevin Lingard. Is that right?
Yes.
It's a rebuttal to his statement as a Member of Parliament.
Sorry, I cannot hear.
It's a rebuttal to his statement as a Member of Parliament.
More than that, I believe.
That is included. Is that right?
I beg your pardon?
When you say, over recent weeks, scurrilous allegations have been made against the sisters and the priests in the form of claims of physical and sexual abuse, are you referring to the ministerial statement in State Parliament by the Honourable Kevin Lingard?
Yes, I am.
And are you referring to what you perceive to be attacks through the newspapers? And are you referring to what you perceive to be attacks from Channel 10 in its news bulletin? When you go on to say, slanderous statements have been made about the conduct of the orphanage, the conditions that prevailed there, and in general about the care that was given to the children, are you responding to the ministerial statement from Kevin Lingard?
I'm responding to the whole.
To all of them.
Together.
All right. Now, in this statement, you, apart from invoking your authority as the bishop, you go further to say that you will not remain silent while the immeasurable benefit that has come to many children through the dedication of the sisters is destroyed by sensationally written media articles or TV programs which do not speak the truth. Did you know at the time that they did not speak the truth?
Well, can I go back and say that I understood all of that media attention as being exaggerated and destructive of the good name of Neerkol and the sisters, and that's what I was responding to. I realise that the letter was very, very badly written, and that's all I can say again. Not badly written, but badly composed.
So are you drawing a distinction between the actual complaints of child sexual abuse and the reporting of those complaints?
Say that again, please.
Are you drawing a distinction between the actual complaints of child sexual abuse and the reporting of those complaints?
I was drawing a distinction between the exaggerated reporting of what had happened at Neerkol, and again, I apologise, I was wrong.
I understand that you apologise. I'm not asking you about that. I'm asking you about your intentions as the leader of your institution in drafting a document so worded for dissemination to so many people across this diocese. And what I'm asking you is that when you say you acknowledged that discipline was much stricter in family life and all aspects of education, and that conditions were often harsh for the sisters and the children, and that human weakness and frustration are always part of every institution, you, as the Bishop of the Diocese, deplore the insult that has been offered to the sisters and the chaplains and the children who were cared for and educated at Neerkol. You're saying you do not accept the allegations of child sexual abuse.
Again, Your Honour, I have to object to that question. It's almost impossible to answer. There are too many suppositions and concepts bound up within it.
Raise the question, Your Honour. Can you see the paragraph that's on the screen in front of you?
Yes.
That's the paragraph that I just quoted to you. I used your words and asked you if you meant by those words that you did not believe the allegations being made from survivors of Neerkol that they were abused as children. No,
I didn't mean that I just was in disbelief of those allegations.
So what did you mean?
I meant that the good name of the Orphanage over 100 years. The work of the sisters and many other people was not to be dismissed because of the allegations.
The allegations in the immediately preceding paragraph, do you see that? The second paragraph on the page. You say, claims of physical and sexual abuse are scurrilous allegations. You then say that there are slanderous statements about the conduct of the orphanage and the conditions that prevailed there, and in general about the care that was given to the children. You see that? You're rejecting the claims of both the sexual abuse and the physical abuse. You're saying they're scurrilous, untruthful. Is that right?
I believe I was not wanting to include the sexual abuse in my rebuttal, if that's the word. But I again say the letter was written very badly and inappropriately.
We agree that you did use the word sexual abuse, whatever your intention. It's there. And you're saying that the claims of sexual abuse that you refer to are scurrilous allegations. What I'm suggesting to you, Bishop, is that that is a refutation, a rejection by you as the Bishop of Rockhampton of the complaints of child sexual abuse that you were aware of.
I believe so, but you may be right.
We're about to move on to another topic.
All right, we will take the lunch break now until 2.
Silence will stand.